Have you ever heard of the Podcastathon? It is a coordinated effort where many podcasters dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice. And I chose the remarkable organization known as Good Grief. Tune in to learn how Good Grief helps grieving children, teens, and families to heal and rebuild their lives, and learn how Good Grief is able to turn a child's profound loss into a life-changing win in transformative ways to find the good in grief. Be sure to join Pam Sullivan, the head of Family Centers at Good Grief, and Dr. Mrittaka Sen, the head of research and evaluation for Good Grief, and me for this touching, uplifting interview. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. And I have a question for you. Have you ever heard of the Podcastathon? It is a coordinated effort where many podcasters dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice, which raises awareness for that charity and amplifies causes that matter. So today, I could not be more delighted to dedicate this Grief and Rebirth podcast episode to a grief support organization close to my heart that I feel many in our grief and rebirth community would want to know about. It is called Good Grief. Good Grief helps children, teens, and families navigate the complexities of loss and build resilience by providing compassionate support and creating spaces where they can share their grief experiences and learn from one another. Its programs include support groups, educational workshops, and community events, all aimed at helping children, teens, and families adapt and rebuild their lives after experiencing loss. I'm so gratified to say that in addition to being a founding board member of Good Grief, I worked as a volunteer for Good Grief for 7 years. In 2004, after I'd come out with my first book about the profound spiritual awakening I experienced when my husband Saul died next to me in a tragic car accident titled They Serve Bagels in Heaven, I was invited to be part of a future search conference whose focus was to explore creating a philanthropy to help children cope with loss. I became inspired to become a founding board member of Good Grief. After all, if grief was so difficult for me to cope with as an adult, how must it be for children who are experiencing grief? Good Grief Centers provide unlimited and free support to children ages 3 to 18, their parent, caregiver, and young adults aged 18 to 30 after the death of a loved one. They have in-person peer support, plus there is a virtual young adult group that serves young adults anywhere. There are 2 Good Grief Centers currently located in Morristown, New Jersey, and Princeton, New Jersey. Good Grief's vision is to create a more grief-informed America, starting with New Jersey. With that vision in mind, Good Grief offers education and training to schools, healthcare organizations, other nonprofits, and professionals in grief and grief support. In recognition of Good Grief advocacy efforts, the New Jersey legislature passed a landmark legislation in January of 2024 that mandates school districts to include grief education as part of their comprehensive health and physical education curriculum For students in grades 8 to 12, students will learn about the physical, emotional, and behavioral aspects of grief, along with coping mechanisms and available support resources. Good Grief has also been approached by organizations in California, Iowa, and Pennsylvania for potential partnerships and guidance on building out grief educational programming in their regions. I'm going to begin this very special interview by introducing you to two remarkable women named Pam Sullivan and Dr. Mrittaka Sen.
Yes.
Pam, who is the head of Family Centers at Good Grief, has been volunteering as a Good Grief facilitator and team coordinator for 18 years. And Mrittaka, who is the head of research and evaluation at Good Grief, participated in Good Grief's peer support program at the Princeton Center for 3 years. I'm looking forward to talking with Pam and Mrittaka about their personal grief journeys, what inspired them to work for Good Grief, how Good Grief helps grieving children and families, the training provided for the professionals and caregivers who support grieving children, the ways Good Grief works with other grief organizations throughout New Jersey and the USA, and much more for an inspiring interview about this inspirational organization that is dedicated to helping children, teens, and families with loss. Hi, Pam and Mrittaka. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast. And Pam, how wonderful to see you again.
Great to see you too, Irene. Lovely to see you. You're looking fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having me, Irene. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure, Mrittaka. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to get to know you this
Likewise.
way. And I'm so happy you guys continue on with this amazing cause that is Good Grief. I really want to share this with everyone in my network who many people who tune in to this podcast, they have lost children or they have lost parents or they have lost people, and they really need to know about Good Grief and what you do. And the fact that you're spreading your influence to other parts of the country is just fabulous. Just wonderful that you're sharing what you're doing and helping so many people. So I want to start with a couple of questions for each of you, and then you could take turns. I'll ask each of you certain questions that I know is your expertise so people can learn about Good Grief. So first, Pam, could you please describe your own personal journey with grief and share what inspired you to both volunteer for and work with Good Grief?
Yes, of course. And again, thank you for
Oh,
having
my
us.
pleasure.
So grateful for this opportunity. So, yes, I've been touched by loss myself. I lost my parents young. My dad died at 62 of a heart attack. My mom died at 69 of lung cancer. I had a sister die 10 years ago. My older sister, a year and a half older than me, she died of stomach cancer at 55,
Oh,
leaving
my.
her 13-year-old daughter. So, absolutely touched by my own losses. We also had losses in our community where we are raising the kids in Chatham. We had a couple of students that died when my kids were in school, and I helped them with things like a repast celebration of the kids' lives. So I started to kind of get into that work a little bit. And then my husband came home one day and he said someone had approached him about getting involved. It was just an idea. And I know, Irene, you're all too familiar with this because you were right alongside him. And he came home and he said, "Hey, someone approached me about this idea. We don't really have a place for families that are grieving to go. And we'd like to start something up. And we thought we'd start small by educating the community." And this is now, I think, 20 years ago. And he had a funny VHS tape, if you can remember that, the VH
I do.
thing. And it was from Dougie's Center, which is in Portland, Oregon, and that's who we modeled after. And I put it in the TV, and it was a picture of this volunteer facilitator playing the guitar with the kids, and just basically creating a comfortable, safe space for kids that had had a death in their family, had lost an immediate family member. And I said, if you get this off the ground, I want to get involved with that. At that point, I had 3 kids and I was raising, stay-at-home mom. So I began because you and Pat and the rest of the team got it up and off the ground. And I participated in the very first facilitator training. That was in August
Wow.
2007. I was there with Mary Robinson and other friends
Right.
and was trained by Donna Sherman of Dougie Center at the time. It was great. So I've been a volunteer facilitator now 18 years. I've held different roles within Good Grief and all that time, part-time roles and full-time. But my favorite thing to do is to hold space for grieving kids, adults, the whole family unit. It just warms my heart, gives me a purpose in life, and I look forward to giving back in that way. So, and I am now head of family centers at Good Grief, as you said, for 2 years.
Oh, that's wonderful, Pam. And how lucky they are to have you too.
Thank
And really, truly, it's wonderful. And Mrittaka, would you like to describe your personal journey with grief and share what inspired you to where your story is a little different than Pam's? How you
Yes,
came to good grief.
yes. So the first, really impactful loss that I can think of way back when I was in college, I grew up in India. So I lost friends, two friends, one of them very close to me when I was 18 and 19. One died by suicide, another one had an illness, a sudden illness that killed her. But I remember being shocked that no one around me was really talking about their death. It was something that people were just brushing aside, or even if us friends were talking about it, the adults would be like, no, 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 just go to your classes, do your thing. So that had stayed on with me. The interest in mental health peaked. I did an internship with the World Health Organization in Cairo. I already had a graduate degree, had worked for several years. And then I moved to the US, but I was studying in communication studies with a social psychology focus, where I was studying interpersonal support for people in crisis. Now, not necessarily grief particularly, but I was studying abuse, neglect, terminal illness, that kind of thing. I had my son in 2010, and then I had a daughter in 2013 while I was enrolled in a doctoral program at Northwestern University in Chicago. And we moved to New Jersey with our 3-month-old daughter and our 3-year-old son for my husband's job that he was starting in a company in Princeton. And I was going to pursue my doctoral program. And we were still in a hotel on Route 1 when our daughter died in sleep. 4 days. It was just 4 days that we had moved to New Jersey. We did not know
Wow.
anyone. We
Oh,
didn't
how
have any community. No medical explanation was found for her death. And our son was 3 at the time. It just caught us
How
in
devastating.
yeah, the shock of that, the whole bizarreness of that. It was just a scene from a horror movie. No community, the trauma of that morning, all of the everything that happened after, all of that, of course, changed our lives. And so I started Googling support for grief. And a few months later, I got the name of Good Grief. And we started as a family. We still did not have the Princeton Center. We were meeting at a church in downtown Princeton. So we went, and while we were there, this was 2014, my son is 4 years old, and we participated, the three of us, in the program. While we were in the program, the Princeton Center came about, so we moved here and we kept participating. I was still enrolled in my PhD, and I was studying interpersonal support in crisis. I never really wanted an academic career. I always knew I wanted to work in a non-academic role, but now it became almost my life's purpose to work in grief support and grief awareness and grief education. I stayed in touch with Good Grief over the years, even after we closed. I stayed in touch. But I also wanted to process my own grief before I came to a role where I'm working with other grieving families. And so I worked on that for several years. And then, aside from the fact that I lived this organization's mission, I was also really touched by the competence and the warmth of the people who work here. At the same time, my research was similar. And so I have that expertise of crisis and what happens to
It's like
your
a
mom.
perfect fit. You're
It
like
was.
a perfect
And
fit for the
yeah, and so
organization.
I have been in touch with them. And then I started in my role as the head of research and evaluation in the beginning of 2023. So again, like Pam coming on, yeah, we more or less started at the same time, right, Pam, in our respective roles. Yeah. So we are coming on, just completed 2 years. But yeah, and my son came back to the program when he was 12. I think COVID was really hard on him because he's a forced only child and he
Yes.
felt even more isolated. And he'd been asking me, what's happening there? Do you like it there? What's happening in the building? And so I brought him one time. He started back in the program. And that is one of the best things in our program is it's unlimited. You can come, anyone can come back, anytime because we don't really put a timeline on grief. So he was back in the program from 2022 until 2024, and he's now 15. And it just changed his life and it changed ours too.
He's the picture of putting the good in grief. He's the picture of putting good in grief.
Yes.
And because there are people who listen to this podcast who are spiritual, they would say to you that you fell into your true soul purpose with what had happened here.
Yes.
I really
believe that too.
Yeah, So let me start with Pam, because I want everyone to understand exactly what the two of you do for good grief. And then we'll start to talk about how you help the children, which is so inspiring. So, Pam, take it away. What's it like? What do you do? Tell us about the kids, how you handle it. What do you do?
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I am head of family centers. So we have our two centers, as you said, Irene. One's in Morristown, New Jersey. The other one's in Princeton, New Jersey. And we'll get into this in a little while, but we have our Good Grief Hands and a lot of other locations and so forth. But I basically, anything program related, related functions is really where I focus. So I manage 6 members of the program staff. 23 what we call team coordinators. Those are people that actually manage our nights of support, and I oversee 200 volunteer facilitators during our nights of support, and we are currently serving over 300 families. And we serve the entire family unit at Good Grief, just making sure that all the Good Grief policies are implemented and practices and across the centers. Again, I've had different roles, previous roles, part-time outreach coordinator, alumni coordinator, to our alumni families, donor engagement officer, and then most recently as head of family centers. So that's what I do. So we can get into a little bit more detail
We'll get
about
more, yeah.
how we, take care of the kids and the families. I don't know if you want me to go now.
We'll go. Let's go into the interview. But I just want to say how lucky they are to have you, because you have such comprehensive experience with Good Grief. So it's wonderful that you can head this program because you know it through and through.
Yeah, a lot of historical knowledge that does
Yes.
help. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to Mrittaka, explain what you do, and then we'll start to get into the nights of support with Pam. So go ahead.
Perfect. So I am the subject matter expert who does that. My title is the head of research and evaluation. And as I said to you before, my expertise is in the social psychological background of support, relationships, communication, especially in crisis situations. So with that expertise, I do all the research. Like we like to say that we provide a safe and supportive and caring environment for our grieving children and families through the peer support model that we employ through our night of support program. But we are also, our night of support program as well as our schools program is research informed and evidence based. We are experts in our field, and we are, aside from being warm and inviting and supportive. So I do all of the research, or I update the research that has gone into creating these fabulous programs. And so I'm updating the research. So I evaluate the two programs, and by that I mean, doing surveys, doing interviews, doing, testimonials, video, analysis, all of that. That helps us understand that what our programs are doing for individuals. It also helps us advocate for our cause to the greater community and our community of funders, donors, foundations, everyone. And it also helps us internally understand whether we are whether we are holding up the fidelity to our program, whether we are doing what we claim to do and what we know we are doing. So that evidence, it comes into a loop, and that informs the implementation of the program. So yeah, so I am mostly doing all the background work for Pam and her team and the learning team that works with the schools and other organizations. And then I'm also doing the evidence. I'm collecting all the evidence, analyzing it, reporting it to our donors, funders, to our internal team, all of that. So that influences the further implementation of those programs.
And how fortunate Good Grief is to have you there. It's like
Thank
all
you.
of your experiences, your education, everything is capsulized, is encapsulated to what you do for Good Grief. And what a beautiful thing. So,
Thank you.
Pam, oh, you're welcome, truly from my heart. Pam, tell us about the Nights of Support. I want everybody to know what you do. I mean, you get these kids come in, they're upset. They lost their parent, they lost their brother, their sister, their whatever, and they're devastated and come in surely with all kinds of other issues also. So I know that you have age appropriate theme based activities and there are set goals for each group. Could you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. So, if a family experiences a death in their family, they contact Good Grief. They meet with our family services managers, and they come in and they do an orientation. And then they come into their nights of support. So, I'll kind of describe what that looks like. So, again, our culture is kind of funny about death. We have good intentions, but we don't always know what to do or say. So, as a result, a lot of these families really feel very isolated in their loss, very alone. Kids do not like to feel different. And when they've lost a parent or a sibling, now they feel different. So, when they come in our doors, they immediately see a whole bunch of other families in the centers. So, we have upwards of 57, 60 people in the room. So, they immediately get that sense of it's not just me.
In
Uh,
this place, I'm not alone.
I'm not alone. Other people get it. They've walked in my shoes, maybe different circumstances, maybe not, but they immediately sense that connection. So we invite them to have a pizza dinner. It's one less meal for the parent to worry about. It also provides another way to socialize and connect. So they have a pizza dinner. And then they move to what we call our opening circle. So everyone gathers in a huge circle, and they're invited to pass a talking stick and say their name and who died. With that, we also provide an option to pass. We don't want to force anyone to share something they're not comfortable sharing. So they say their name and who died. Often it's the very first time that they've said this in front of other people. So it's validating. I'll share just a quick story that
Oh,
happened two
please
weeks
do.
ago. A mom came in. She had lost her son. He was in her 20s. It was the first time she was coming to Good Grief because, our doors are always open. It's not as if no one's allowed in or has to wait until September to come. We always have people coming in. And she was there for the first time, and she was in the circle. And someone passed her the talking stick, and she somehow was able to find the strength to say her name and her daughter's name and who died. And she got choked up. She got emotional. And there just happened to be this 8-year-old child standing next to her in the circle. She had no idea who this 8-year-old was. And the 8-year-old turned to her and said, "Can I give you a hug? Do you need a hug?"
Oh,
And the woman said, "Yes." And they embraced.
oh my
And it
God.
was such a special moment. And we're all crammed in there. I think we had about 65 people 2 weeks ago in that circle. So it becomes a very sacred, very powerful space. Then all the kids and groups are divided by age and grade. So everyone between the age of 3 and 18. And then we have a young adult group. We have a couple of different adult groups. We have spouse loss. We have child loss. We have caregiver loss. They all go, so the family comes together as a unit. And then they all go off into their rooms for about an hour and 15 minutes, where we really have our peer support model begin in those groups. They have a little opening circle, they have a little closing circle. We really normalize talk of death. We don't say passed on or passed away, we say died. We fully embrace it and try to make it as comfortable as possible for participants to speak that way as well. And then we have trained volunteer facilitators that are really loving listeners. I'll explain what the training process is like later on, but they hold the space for them. They have a couple volunteers in every room, and And they use listening techniques, and the focus is to make them feel safe, comfortable. They're very welcoming. And this peer support model really fosters connection, understanding that can lead to hope.
Lead to hope, and I'll bet it leads to friendships also, because when the kids feel so alone and now they're making friends who share similar experiences, I'll bet a lot of bonding goes on in those groups also.
A lot of bonding, and we actually encourage for them to get together. We let it happen organically, but often they do connect and they do form friendships. And we've heard that from our alumni families who've come through the program, and their best friends are still, 15 years later, because they have that shared connection and an understanding. So this is some of Mrittika's work I'll mention, but we do have activities that are theme based that we introduce through the program year from September to June. The activities focus on 4 different themes: connection, coping, communication, and competency. There's 19 of them. The goals include support systems, meaning and identity, environment, continuing bonds. Very important, because we have this continuing bond with our person who died. The relationship continues in our heart and in our heads. And by the way, we also embrace even the relationship that wasn't necessarily positive. We don't say loved ones, we say your person for that
That's
reason.
perfect.
We also have family communication, identification, prevention, and self advocacy. So it sounds like kind of structured. Mrittika and I were talking about this yesterday. But we really follow the group's lead as well. We have the theme in the back of our minds to get to. And for kids, that can be in the circle time. And as they're running through the different shared spaces they have, the volcano room, the hospital room, the sand table room, all the theater room, all means of expression for the kids. And we'll try to touch on those themes. I'll give you a quick couple of examples on some of the activities we've done recently. There was one that's called What I Need. The theme is competency and the goal is prevention. And what we talked about were emotions and feelings that center around guilt, fear, regret, anger. And we invited the kids and the adults actually to talk about those and write them down on a little piece of dissolving paper. And they wrote all these words down. And then we invited them to put them in water and watch them disappear. And how can we lighten those feelings? What can we do with them? How can we make them feel lighter, make them disappear? And I'll tell you a funny story. The adults actually decided they put all their words in a bowl, and they all went to the bathroom and stood around the toilet bowl and like turned up their words and their feelings and dumped them in the toilet bowl. It was like a ritual around the toilet bowl. But it's about like letting go, expressing them,
And let it
sorting
go.
through them, and then like letting them go. Something similar was another activity called Weight of My Worries. The theme is communication and the goal is self advocacy. We had a collection of rocks, all different shapes and sizes. And we said, choose the one that best reflects your worry. So there's big ones, there's small ones. But, what we see and hear a lot at Good Grief is the kids are worried about their parent. The parent is worried about the kids. And they're not necessarily going to tell each other. So we create this safe space and we say, whatever is said here stays here. And they're free to kind of express those worries. So we passed a backpack around the circle and each kid chose a rock that resembled their worry and put it in. So it got heavier as it went around the circle. So then we talked about how can you make it lighter? Where can you go? What can you do with that worry? How can we sort through those worries? And we have discussion around that. And a lot of times the kids are supporting each other. We're just holding the space, and they'll say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Same with the adults. Then we pass the backpack back around with examples of how to make the worry lighter by removing the rock. So the last kid, it was much lighter. So it's like, concrete ways to visualize what these feelings are. A lot of times kids can't necessarily, they struggle with putting words to their feelings.
Absolutely. They're really uncomfortable with that. And you're teaching them. And by the way, it translates to all parts of their lives because you're actually giving them emotional IQs. You're teaching them to express their feelings,
Yes,
to be able
absolutely.
to process their feelings. My favorite part, Pam, I remember very well the volcano room.
Yes.
Isn't that where kids bring their anchor?
Yes. Yes.
And what do they do in that volcano room? I think
Oh,
that's
they
so great.
Oh, yeah, they've got a punching bag with punching gloves in the corner. We have all kinds of soft, squishy balls. We throw them at each other. We're in there. It's all about releasing, letting it go, all of that. I'll mention another activity called Walk the Line. Theme is connection, goal is environment. That's really powerful. You may have seen it before. It's done in other organizations, but we invite the kids to walk the line, or the adults if they want to participate. Walk to the line if you had a child die. Walk to the line if your dad died. Walk to the line if your mom died of cancer. But then we go further because we support kids whose parents or siblings have died all different ways, not just cancer and accidents, but suicide, and accidental overdose, substance abuse, and murder. So one
Oh,
of the
wow.
prompts is walk to the line if your person died of murder. And you wouldn't believe how the kids stand up and they walk to the line. And then once they get to the line, they can look around and say, "Oh my God, I thought I was the only one whose mom was murdered." And you're in line with 3 other kids. So you don't think of that it really but it does. It does happen, and there are different ways. So we embrace all of those deaths and make it almost normalize it for the kids. You're not alone. Look who's next to you. So that person lost their person the same way.
Mm.
So they're very effective, the activities.
It's so wonderful, Pam, what you're doing. And the thing that I really love even more about it is that the kids are not hearing people's platitudes that are either healthy or not healthy, depending on what their backgrounds are. Because of all the research and what you're doing, they're really getting healthy, good, positive guidance and advice that's probably transforming their lives in the long run,
Yeah.
helping them to
Great.
cope with so many different things. So, Mrittaka, tell us about the Good Grief Schools. What does it provide? What is provided? The topics that are addressed, are there goals for the each type of professional and caregiver? Let it rip, Mrittaka. Tell us all about that.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So, while we support grieving children and families in our centers, we also realize that they go out into the world and they are surrounded by a lot of different people. And we want one of Good Grief's mission is also to empower communities with awareness and growth so that they are better able to support grieving individuals. So, one key environment where children spend a lot of their time and form really impactful bonds is the school. And so, around 2007, 8, around then, Good Grief started, the leadership started discussing where else to support our children, where else can we make an impact so that our children feel supported even outside of our centers. Because, like Pam was mentioning, we provide them with all these tools and all these strategies and all this support and connections, but they are also coming to us only once or twice a month, but they're spending their lives outside of our centers. So Good Grief Schools was founded in 2018 after several rounds of discussions with educators, administrators, parents, caregivers in the community. And Good Grief Schools has 4 programs under its umbrella. So the first program is Good Grief Groups, which is modeled on the same model that we employ in our centers, which are peer support groups. However, the difference is that unlike our nights of support, this is a 9-week comprehensive closed group that, of a peer support group of students in schools. We followed a train the trainer model for our schools program, where we believe that in a sensitive and vulnerable context and situation of grief, children do not need outside experts to come and tell them what to do. They need to trust and rely on those caring individuals that they already know in the schools. So with that in mind, we train the educators, teachers, counselors, nurses, coaches, administrators, parents, all of that to facilitate these grief groups in schools. Now, this is for students, mourning, grieving the loss of an important person in their lives. Our centers support children who have lost a parent or a sibling or a primary caregiver. Our school groups support children who are grieving the loss of anyone important in their lives. It could be a coach, a mentor, a
Absolutely.
grandparent, anyone. So that's Good Grief Groups. The other program is Routes to Resilience, which is a social emotional learning based curriculum that we offer to educators, where we also expand the scope of grief to encompass a lot of adversity from various challenges, such as a divorce, a move,
Yes, because losses,
abuse,
they
from
involve grief also.
exactly deportation, deployment, all of this, a health condition, all of this. So we are through that program, we are training teachers to implement, or educators or administrators, school professionals to
Wonderful.
implement strategies that will help kids cope with loss and adversity in their lives. Then we have professional development within Good Grief, where we are, offering trainings, workshops, presentations, seminars to teachers, clinicians, support staff, administrators, anyone. And then we have the fourth program is the parent and caregiver education programs, where we partner with a school to, where we go to their parent group and caregiver group, the greater community, anyone is welcome. And they get this information on what grief is, what it does, how it impacts our identities, all these different coping mechanisms, all of that. So the idea, Irene, is to develop a grief informed society. It is something that happens to everyone, some sooner, some later, but we are, as a culture, not a grief informed, grief
You're
aware,
absolutely right.
let alone grief conversant community. Even if we understand what's happening, we don't have the words to communicate with someone who's grieving. Or if we are grieving ourselves, we don't have the words to communicate what we are going through or what our needs are. And so the idea behind Good Grief Schools is to educate and empower our school community to be informed, as well as we also provide them with a turnkey curriculum. So they get all the activities and the modules and the lesson plans and all of that to employ with their children, with their students.
And
So
you know
that
what's
is
so
what
exciting? That's wonderful, Mrittaka. And you know what's so exciting about that? When you educate these people in the school systems, that's bleeding into their own personal lives too. And you're enlightening them in their lives too, so they may start to handle things a little differently. Now that they've been educated about it, they may handle things differently in their own lives. So even their families start to
benefit.
and their
Yes.
friendships will start to benefit from what you're bringing
Yes.
to them.
Yes.
Pam, what's the age? What are the age groups of the kids who come to Good Grief? And are they primarily grieving parents, siblings, and grandparents, or do they grieve other
Yeah,
people
good
also?
question. Yeah, thanks, Irene. So we serve kids between the ages of 3 and 18. We also have a group for young adults. That includes a virtual group for young adults because, again, we want to welcome the whole family unit. Sometimes we have a family come in and their child is on a campus somewhere, and we want to make sure that they have access to our peer support program, so they have the option to Zoom in
That's
from
fabulous.
campus, and that way, their sister or brother might be in another group in the center, and their parent is there in one of the adult groups, but they can dial into that virtual group.
Wonderful.
So yeah, and then multiple different adult groups, spouse loss, child loss, and so forth. And I would say typically, yes, it's mom has died, dad has died, or a sibling has died. But recently we saw with COVID and anxiety and depression increasing, it also accidental overdoses, deaths rose. And what we were finding there were parent and caregivers, for example, grandparents were coming to Good Grief because they lost their adult child, and maybe their adult child was married to someone who's now incarcerated or also died. Now they're finding themselves to be parents, in their 60s and 70s. So we created a caregiver group to support that unique
It's wonderful.
population of of people because there was just a need for it in the community. So we've since added that. It doesn't we still kind of adhere to a death in the immediate family. However, if it's a caregiver that died, let's say an aunt was taking care of the kids while mom and dad were working, they are able to come to Good Grief and participate. If their caregiver was someone very close to them, spent a lot of time with them, was raising them, absolutely, they can
They
come
can
to
do
Good.
that.
So we'll have some kids that had an aunt die that was raising them, or an uncle or a grandparent. Yeah.
That's marvelous. And what about friendships and all, Mrittaka? Do they also help if they've lost a dear friend or anything like that?
So that is the kind of support that we provide in our schools. So the, Good Grief groups in schools offer support to anyone grieving, a student that is grieving the death of anyone that is important to them, a friend, a neighbor, a coach, a teacher, a grandparent, an uncle, aunt, anyone. Any loss that has an impact on their lives, an impact on their heart.
Well,
We also routes to resilience is our social emotional based curriculum that expands the scope of grief. So it also, because the loss of an important person in a child's life is considered an adverse childhood experience, which if left unaddressed has, all the research shows that it can lead to several physical, mental and behavioral health risks. And so with that in mind, we want children to be able to cope with any adversity that severely affects them in a healthy way. And so that program
wonderful.
offers, support to children grieving a move, a friendship, a broken home, like anything that a natural disaster, anything that is a life altering circumstance that is expected to, have a long-term impact. So we want to address that at the beginning so we can mitigate some
It's
of.
so important, Mrittaka. It's so inspiring and important what you guys are doing. Pam, how many kids does the Good Grief serve in its 2 locations every year? And what about neurodiverse participants? I mean, you have kids who have all different kinds of issues, right? Bereaved parents also come to the nights of support. You want to
Yeah.
address all of that?
Yes, absolutely. Again, we welcome the entire family, and the family looks forward to be able to do this together. It's it's something they can do together as a family unit. So, yes, so the kids go off into their groups and the adults, the parent or caregiver goes into their group. Now, we do have some people that say, "You know what? I think I'm here for my child. I'd like them to be in group. I'm going to sit out of groups." So they're not, they have the choice. Most do take advantage and go in the groups. It's funny though, we call them, the sit out group. They don't, but they become a group because they're hanging out
That's
together.
true. Yeah, right.
So they become a group. But we are right now just about 1,000 participants annually across Princeton and Morristown that we support. We have 10 nights of support, 6 in Morristown, 4 in Princeton. We're actually opening up a 4th night next week in Princeton. So we're
Fantastic.
excited about that. We're kind of getting back to where we were before COVID, rebuilding. So we collaborate with a lot of other communities. We're building something in Manville currently for a peer support model. And as you said, our strategic goal is to make sure that families can access some kind of support, even if it's not our center, it's other centers, within 30 minutes of
And
where.
you're inspiring people through your educational systems and all. You're
Yeah.
inspiring people to start this in their communities also.
Yes. And we have nice relationships with other centers as well. We're all about collaboration and supporting each other. We also have, a vetted list of outside resources, therapists, and so forth if the families need. We also have monthly webinars that we offer to families and external workshops, other resources. To get to your point about neurodiverse participants, yes, as long as they can sit in a peer support group model where they can participate and also receive, then it's absolutely fine. We do things like we offer fidgets, and honestly, all the kids do well with fidgets. I have a fidget right now. Um,
So do I.
yes, right. We're all about the fidgets at Good Grief. Even when we have
Yeah.
staff
Tell
meetings,
us your fidget so everybody can
we
see
have
what is.
it's a little paper clip. Oh,
Oh,
yes,
It's something that one of our facilitators made for us
he
for
made.
this
oh,
meeting. Yeah,
wow.
and I hijacked one.
And you get
Yeah,
one and it can help them calm down
yeah.
that they're
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yes, and it sometimes makes the kids feel a little bit more comfortable with something in their hands. Maybe they don't wanna
Right.
make eye contact, and they want a little piece of Play-Doh in their hands or whatever, so we have that, and we have coloring, and we have flexible seating, depending on the participants' needs. As Mritika said, it's grief is so unique to everyone, but we also all process differently, and some of our neurodivergent friends really process differently, so we have some accommodations for them. Again, as long as they can sit in that peer support and model and take advantage of that model. And we don't offer, one to one. It's all that peer support model.
I also love, Pam, that it's an atmosphere of acceptance. This is
Yeah.
a place where these kids are not being judged. This
Hmm.
is a place where they're being accepted and they're being helped.
It's really nice, Irene. It's funny. Sometimes we'll have some volunteer facilitators worried, like, ooh, okay, so they can sit in the group, but will other kids judge them? They welcome them with open arms. They are not the least bit judgmental, and it is absolutely fine, you
It's
know?
actually deepening the kids who are not neurodivergent to accept and understand
And
more
learn
about
from.
that and learn
And
from
one of
too.
the, I think, I'll just add one little thing to, I mean, our approach is that we believe that neurodiverse participants are able to provide support as much as they're able to receive support. So we do not, we come from a space of respect. And so we do not assume that we are only supporting and helping them. They are helping each other. And we do not come from a place of patronizing them, like
I
we
love
are.
that.
Yeah, so we believe that if they are, like Pam was saying, if they're able to take part in that peer support group, they're also providing support and perspectives and experience and friendships and all of that with to their fellow participants who may not be neurodiverse, but they are learning from each other through that
Marvelous.
experience.
It's so wonderful. It's just so inspiring. Mrittaka, how many schools and professionals and children does Good Grief Schools impact? You have a
So
few statistics for us?
yes, I am your I'm your data person too. So to date, we have partnered with 380 schools over, in New Jersey, surrounding states.
380 schools?
Yes,
That's wonderful.
380 schools. We have trained over 20,000, individuals. And so we have trained these individuals and they have gone on to, of course, impact the lives of hundreds and thousands of children in their professional and personal capacities. Because like I was saying to you, that we are training, the professionals in the school system, but we are also providing education to parents and caregivers in the community. So, and then the teachers and the nurses and counselors and administrators and support staff, anyone that we are training is also mother and a father and an aunt and a community member and coach and a mentor. By making them grief informed and grief aware and grief equipped, they are then impacting the dozens of children in their professional and personal lives.
It is so marvelous. Pam, tell us about the training because there may be people listening to this who think maybe I'd like to be a facilitator for Good Grief. Maybe I would like to get involved with helping kids like this. So, what kind of training do you provide for adults who want to facilitate support groups?
Yes, thank you. And we would more than welcome them. And I would just say too that in addition to becoming a volunteer facilitator, there's a lot of opportunities to volunteer. If that's not something you'd like to do, we have a lot of opportunities, other opportunities. But for facilitator training, we conduct a training 4 times a year. We actually just did one last weekend in the middle of the snow. We decided at the last minute to do some Zoom in the snow, but we trained 21 new volunteer facilitators. They're fabulous. They loved the experience. So, in that training, It consists of an online training segment. So they do that a couple of weeks or a week in advance. I think it's 3 hours or something. And then we do 3 full days of in person training. And we alternate between Princeton and Morristown. We offer them four
Now,
times.
do you have specific people who train them, or are you traveling around doing the training?
Yeah, we actually have because we have staff in both areas. We like I just did this past training along with three of my colleagues. One is based in Princeton, the rest are in Morristown. So it's mostly those of us that are really involved in program, but we also have Evelyn as well doing our training.
And Annette
And
yeah, the learning team.
sometimes in that when they're not busy doing a training themselves because they're out in the community doing so many other trainings, you know? So yes, we all present and offer up the training. And then the volunteer facilitator would go through that, fill out some applications and paperwork. At that point, they would have come to our center for a tour. They would have learned a little bit more ahead of the training. And then they shadow. So they kind of follow a group along, you know, they just kind of observe a couple of times and then they can choose who they want to work with, a kids group, an adult group, and so forth. And we also welcome them to sub in different groups if we have a last
So
minute.
fulfilling because they're doing this. They're helping so many people.
Yes. And we also have ongoing professional development for them. So they do the training, they become the volunteer facilitator, but also we meet as a group with the volunteers ahead of the nights of support. Tonight, I have my night of support. I'll go in and meet with my facilitators. There's about 22 of them. And we connect and we check in with each other and how are you? It's all about our own peer support group of volunteers to make sure they're comfortable going into their night. And then we'll meet at the end of the night in post group again to make sure that they're okay going home and share any heavy stories. We don't want them going home burdened. So we're big into
wonderful.
self care. Also, during this pre group time, we might brainstorm some challenges. Maybe there's some kids that are what we call spirited. You know, they have a lot to do and a lot to say. And you know, how do we meet them where they're at kind of thing, but keep everybody safe and heard and all of that stuff. We also have, I mentioned this when we were speaking earlier, we have this really great Spring Institute Symposium that we host every year in March 15th. We have a great keynote speaker, Dr. Schoenfeld is going to join us. And we bring the volunteer facilitators together from both centers so they get to overlap and exchange and have lunch together and brainstorm challenges. And we do a workshop and we have some outside guests joining us for some workshops. It's a great day. So the point is, we don't just do the training and then leave it alone. We're always brushing up on skills because it is kind of tricky. You have different personalities, different losses, different
And
circumstances.
to learn how to listen to these different situations and
Exactly. And how do you hold the space for 8 kids, you know, or 7 adults or, you know, so we're always working at it with professional development. And then we're big on appreciation events. We'll have a little cocktail celebration at our Spring Institute so that we can thank our volunteers. We actually have for this year we have 2 facilitators that are with us 15 years.
wow.
We have another 5 that are 10 years and another 8 that are 5 years. So our retention rate is really high for our volunteer facilitators. They get a lot of meaning out of their experience. They always say, I get more out of it, putting in the energy than, you know, it's not so demanding. It's just a very impactful and meaningful volunteer experience. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you know what impacts me about this is that even though you're so well informed, I guess that would be Mrittaka's
Domain.
department in a way. So well informed with all the statistics and the things that you do and the educated thing, but what you get from good grief is it's heart centered.
Mhm.
Everyone who comes to good grief works for good grief, is involved with good grief. It opens their heart and it gives, and they're kind to each other. They're loving and kind to each other. So even though everything that you do is informed, it's also filled with love, really. And I think that is so important. So for everyone, the kids, for the adults, no matter what their role is, it's just so wonderful. And Riddick, I want to ask you also, you also trained professionals?
Mm-hmm.
to
In schools.
facilitate peer support? So that's
Yes.
another thing that you do. So is that similar to what you guys are doing for your facilitators?
Yes. So Good Grief Group it follows the same model as the Night of Support program, except that of course we need to be cognizant of the structure of a school and also the various types of losses that students are experiencing. And so those trainings are provided to educators, counselors, like professionals within a school environment to facilitate these grief groups for students in their schools. And so this particular program is a 9-week, closed group. Our Night of Support program is an open group, so people can, we never turn anyone away. They don't have to wait a certain time. They can come and join us, anytime that they feel prepared to do so. In a school environment, what we have experienced is, once a group starts and people come in and out, it can be disruptive because they're also working against schedules and against, like with teachers and various other dynamics that are playing a role. So Good Grief Groups is a 9-week program to provide peer support the same way that our Night of Support does, except that it is a closed group as well as it is for students grieving the loss of anyone who is important to them. So we train the teachers, pretty much, the same thing that Pam was saying about training our facilitators about, what is grief? What are its manifestations? What are, how does it impact our identity and our functioning and our relationships? How we see ourselves, our self-worth, all of that. Then we move on to, like developing skills. So I would say, Irene, that there are 2 or 3 different pillars of our training that I would like to emphasize. One is that we are trying to build awareness in the adult. We are trying to build awareness about grief, because for most of us, this is an entirely untouched topic.
You don't talk about it. In many
We don't
families
talk
and many
about
sisters,
it.
you don't talk about it.
No,
It's
we
like
don't learn it in
the elephant in the
schools.
room.
Yeah, we don't learn about it. I mean, we learn how to do math, we learn how to do, how to write, how to read, but we don't know how to be in touch with our emotions
Yes.
especially when something goes wrong. And so that's one of the skills that we are trying to, name it. We are trying to call it by a name. We are trying to define it. We are trying to explain what it does, how it impacts us. That is awareness. That is awareness. And then we are also focused on building skills. And by skills, I mean communication skills, how to identify your emotions and your needs, and how to advocate for your needs, how to build those connections with others, with a supportive network, how to manage triggers, how to,
That's
identify
huge.
and prevent, any negative, spiraling or any negative impact that might, have, like, that might cause you to really not be able to function well. So all of those healthy coping skills, all of those, and then what Pam was saying earlier, we are very big on continuing bonds with the person who died. Of
I
course,
love that.
if you want to, if you, like Pam was saying, it might be a person that you did not have a strong positive relationship with, and you might not want to continue your bond. So we leave it, but we provide them with the tools if they choose to continue their bond. So we train the adults on all these different aspects of supporting the child, and based on, awareness, skill building. And we come from a belief, especially in schools, we come from a belief that we are here to build on an existing trusting relationship that the adult already has with the student that they're taking care of. So that relationship, because this is such a sensitive and vulnerable topic, that we do not want it to be, like you were saying, just from your head, like,
Right.
okay, my teacher comes in, she's going to talk about grief, and I'm just going to check a few boxes. We want that very meaningful interaction that also builds on a relationship that they already have. Because what we have also seen in schools is, teachers and counselors and administrators, they're overworked. They're going from, one place to the other, like, throughout the day.
They have grief to cope with too.
Exactly, absolutely. And so we don't want this to be one more thing that they have to do. We want it to be a truly meaningful and impactful and useful experience. And so that is one of the things that we tell them is you already have these tools in your toolboxes. You already have these skills. We are just making you aware of them, and we are adding those that you might need more, and we are just helping you identify those. So I think that's the focus of the training that we provide to educators and professionals.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And you know what impacts is so impactful to me is that what a different world we would have if the world got the education that you are giving to all of these people about the coping skills, about the communication skills, about acceptance of people who are a little bit different, working with people from not only an educated place, but from a heart-centered place. Our whole world would be I'm so glad you're there to be role models for this and to spread what you're doing. It's so valuable.
Which is why we are so grateful that New Jersey is the first state in the country to mandate grief education, and
Go
so
New
many
Jersey.
so so many states are looking to us
Yeah.
to have this in their states. And we are really thrilled that that our kids, my son who's now in ninth grade, is going to get grief education as part of his health and PE class from next year, from this next
That
school
could
year.
literally change the world if more people were
Exactly, Irene. I
aware
couldn't
of what
agree
you're
more.
doing. I mean, it's just wonderful.
Thank
Pam,
you.
I know that you also have special enrichment events that you provide for families. I mean, I know one of them is Grief Expressions Camp, the Day of Remembrance. I love chill and chat for adults. I would be all over that one. And movie nights for kids. And anything else you want to tell us? Describe some of these activities that you have.
Sure, sure. So yes, Grief Expressions Camp. We couldn't do it during COVID, so we are so excited to bring it back. It's a 3-day camp. It's in our Morristown Center. It's for first to sixth graders, and then our middle and high schoolers can be counselors. And it's all about being immersed in the arts. And you probably wouldn't be shocked that we have so many local artists willing to dedicate their time and donate their time and energy and talents for this camp. So it's all about the kids expressing themselves through photography. It was actually someone who was on staff with us. Art, painting, music, dance, all different ways. We had a young adult who was a participant came in our programs. Her mom died, and she trained to become a volunteer facilitator. She also came back to our camp and sat and worked with all the kids on writing lyrics,
Oh,
writing their own
wow.
lyrics in honor of
Oh,
their person. So, and the camp culminates in a little talent show, if you will, at the end. So it's great. It's a really nice. It's also, we don't meet during the summer. We wrap up in June, so it's a really nice thing for the kids to get
it's
back.
like a continuation.
It is. It's a little something. It's a little touch point over the summer and just a great way for them to express themselves. Day of Remembrance, we were just able to bring that back as well. That was a beautiful event. We did it in Morristown. We're going to do it in Princeton in another week. We had about 65 participants come in. They gather. We do a candle lighting ceremony where we read their person's name. We recite poems. They do a craft. This year's was create a little candle in a votive and write messages to their person. They bring in their person's favorite meal, and we all
Wow.
share in the meal. If you remember, Irene, I think Mary Robinson, I think it was her idea, and I think we first did it with her. I remember sitting outside back in Summit days. So yeah, it's just a really meaningful event, and this is on top of people coming to our nights of support twice a month. So it's a nice additional. Same with the chill and chats. The parent can go out for a drink at a local restaurant. We have one in Princeton, one in Morristown area. For a lot of them, this is the first time they're going out since their spouse died. It's really hard for them to connect. And we have other families there, sometimes alumni families, that welcome them in and say, come on, it's okay, you can join us. Then we saw that they were having struggles with babysitting. So some of our volunteer facilitators said, they can drop the kids at the center, we'll pop a movie in, we'll have some popcorn, and the parents have some, or
It's
parent caregiver
wonderful.
has some fun for, a couple of hours. So we've implemented that. we have a 5K. So this is a fundraiser, but it's also a beautiful way for not only families to connect and honor their person that died, but for the community at large. So we could have upwards of 1,000 people attend and they can run. But for the kids, we have little arts and crafts. We have a kids dash. It's really fun. And I'll just say that in Princeton, it's Sunday, May 18th. And
Woohoo!
in
Hey,
Morristown,
everyone, Sunday, May 18th in
Sunday,
Morristown.
May 18th in Princeton, and in Morristown, it's Sunday, June 1st. So if you're a runner or you just want to come and have fun, join us. Or if you
Or a
want
walker.
here,
Or a walker.
walkers are welcome. Everybody is welcome. We have a beautiful memory wall where people write notes to their person. It's all about honoring their person who died and raising funds for good grief and for those in our community we collaborate with to draw attention to this need in our community.
Terrific. Absolutely
But,
terrific.
yeah.
Mrittaka, I know you've told us a lot about your son. Is there anything you would like to add? Because I know his life was transformed by good grief.
Well, yes, absolutely. He was 3 when his sister died, and he was absolutely in love with his little sister. And right from the start, we were very open with him about anger and sadness and every emotion that we were feeling and he was feeling. And her death was sudden, so even the shock and bizarreness of that, she was here one moment and she was gone the next. And but back in those days, he did not really understand the concept of death. He was only 3 years old. So we would talk about it and we would give him images and all of these different ways to explain to him. But I think coming to good grief, he was unburdened. He felt unburdened, because back in those days, he also saw a lot of tears from me.
He
And
didn't
we
have to be responsible for your grief
yeah,
because
he
your
didn't
grief
have
was being
to.
taken care of so he could attend more,
Yeah,
get
and then
attention for himself, right?
yes, and he was, he made friends, he did craft, he did music. He held on to his sister's memories in a way that was not all heavy and sad. And so we would talk about it. We always talked about her. She's always been a very big part of our lives. But in the car, I remember, and this is something a lot of parents that I have interviewed have also said to me, and what Pam was saying, this whole coming together as a family over something that is so important to you. So he would chat away. He's 4 years old, 5 years old, a kindergartner, chat away with us on our drive back, and we could sense that he was happy. It was being normalized. It was normalized in at home. The three of us had a very normalized, way of addressing it, but not outside. But here he could feel like the same thing that happens to all our children is that they don't want to be different, but here he is with others and he's happy and he's being himself. So we closed when he was 7, but again, COVID was really hard for him. And then he came back to the program in the end of 2022 and closed at the beginning of 2024. But he wanted to remain involved. He asks me, like today, he was asking me about this podcast. And so he wanted to be
He's
involved.
got to watch it too, right?
Yes, and he's 15 now, a high schooler, but he wanted to be involved. And last year he did a Lego workshop for the kids
Oh,
in
wonderful.
Princeton that he wants to. Thanks, Pam. That he wants to offer again, and he calls it Building from Grief. And
Oh,
and so
wonderful.
he's always been a Lego enthusiast, and we have a Lego wall in our Princeton Center, and he's just very excited about it. So those are our biggest stories of fulfillment and happiness is when our participants come back in other roles and give back to us. I mean, look at me. I was a participant for 3 years. I am now a full-time employee. My son was a participant, wanted to come back and do a workshop. There are so many, like Pam was saying earlier, so many who have been participants and have trained to be volunteers. And those are our stories of just like grief morphs and changes with time, their relationship with good grief also changes and morphs over time. So they always find a home. They always find a place
It's
that they
wonderful.
belong.
You know, if someone doesn't participate in a program like yours, a lot of people carry the shame of this happened to me their whole lives. I'm an exception to the rule. This happened to me. It's like it's a burden that they
Mhm.
carry like a backpack on their all their lives, and it probably taints everything in their lives. By doing what you do, you take away the shame. They're not abnormal. It's not a stigma. They can integrate it into their
Mhm.
lives and drop the backpack. They don't have to worry. It's something that happened to me, and it actually, from going to your program and all, it deepened my experience of being a human being too, and my understanding of life. Would you agree with that, Pam?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that
Right?
was well said. Yes.
Yeah, the
Yes.
backpack is a better analogy than the target.
Well, I talk about that on the podcast all the time, how people have all these unhealed issues
Yes.
that taint their lives. It's like a backpack that they carry through their lives unless you heal it, which is what you guys are doing
Yeah.
Mhm.
with your
Yes.
programs. Are there other organizations, Mrittaka, that now implement your programs?
We are constantly training, nonprofits, healthcare organizations, faith-based organizations, corporations, universities,
Wonderful.
in being grief informed and grief educated and grief conversant. Regarding implementation, schools are the only organizations that implement our program in their communities, in their setting. But we are training these other types of organizations to be grief informed and grief conversant. So they are going to their work and their functioning and their impact with the knowledge and the training that we provide them.
Absolutely marvelous. So, Pam, we've got everybody turned on. They want to get involved with good grief. Maybe they want to volunteer. Maybe they want to work. Maybe they want to contact you. Maybe they want to find something they can do to help the organization. How do they get involved? What should they people who are listening who are now really inspired, what should they do? Call up Pam Sullivan, or is there another way?
No, and as I said, we welcome volunteers. They are the heart of our organization, and we couldn't do what we do without them. We have so many gifted volunteers and so many different facets. But yes, the ways to get involved is to book a tour of the Morristown or the Princeton Center. So they can visit our website www.good-grief.org for volunteer and or donor information. It's all there. And then that will guide you to the right person to talk to. If it's me, I'm more than willing to take on a phone call.
And
Or
tell them, everyone, that you came from the podcast,
yes,
that you heard Mrittaka and Pam on the podcast.
absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So that's what people can do, and come join us at our 5K. And our doors are always open, and we welcome everyone.
It's marvelous. And so if they want to, Mrittaka, if they want to tell us who funds Good Grief, and if people want to donate, do they just go to the site to make a
Mhm.
donation? Or if they want to do more, is there more that they can do? How does that work?
Yes, we are funded by individual donors, foundations, some corporate sponsorships, and so we are always looking for support. And yes, the website is the one-stop shop. It's the first place, and it will take you to the right person who can, like Pam was saying, whether you want to be involved in any other shape or in any other capacity, or you want to donate. The website will give you all the information. Again, it's www.good-grief.org.
And
And it has all our
we're going to provide
information.
links on the show notes and everything. So anyone who is listening can just look down and click. I hope you'll get a lot of clicks. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I think
Thank you.
that we're inspiring people. And
Yes.
Pam, I'm going to let you have the last word. We know the life-changing impact Good Grief has on grieving children. Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know about this amazing organization?
Just that, our peer support model is life changing. And as we've said through this podcast, it does make such an impact being able to reach people, especially young people, so that they can grow up healthy and strong. We recently, and thriving in their adult lives. We recently reached out to our alumni families that had closed about 15 years ago. And if it's okay, I'll just read from like
Please do.
to a couple of sentences. It was really cute too because I reached out to them. It was so great to talk to them. And they sent me photos of what they looked like when they came to the center and what the kids look like now. I
Oh,
call them kids,
wow.
but they're,
Oh, wow. Wow.
27 or whatever. So the first one said, although my love and grief for my husband has not disappeared, I have learned to live with his memory and love. We learned how to navigate this new life through what we learned and experienced from good grief. Another one wrote, the environment of good grief helped my children and I process our grief in a supported and comforting way. We were able to learn to navigate this loss and not just find our way forward in this new world, but to thrive in it. Another one says, I will forever be grateful for my good grief family and thankful for the connection we so desperately needed at that point in our lives. So it truly is life changing. This work is so important. I hope that so many people out there join us in this effort to grief inform everyone
It's
in our
wonderful.
communities so that we know how to respond. And just very simple listening techniques. We all have a tendency to talk a little too much and we need to listen more. And that can just be a head nod or repeating a few words that someone has said. And
Absolutely.
those are some of the listening techniques that we utilize. And this way, we ensure that no child grieves alone. And that's really our mission.
That's absolutely wonderful. What a transformed world we would have.
Yeah.
If there were more good griefs everywhere. I actually thank you so much, Pam. And I want to close this incredibly special interview with a compelling quote from Mrittika, because Mrittika, when you wrote this, I said, this is how I'm going to conclude this wonderful interview. And this is the quote. Good grief takes a very comprehensive approach to addressing grief through peer support for grieving children and families, and through education and training for the greater community. Over the past 20 years, we have supported thousands of children and families at the most difficult and vulnerable times of their lives. We offer a safe and supportive environment, and our programs are research-informed and evidence-based. We help children and families process their grief and develop healthy coping and communication skills. We believe that death is a natural aspect of life, and grief is one's way of feeling and expressing love and longing. We especially need to normalize grief for children so that their loss does not define them or deter them from reaching their full potential. For those of you listening today, thank you so much for your time and commitment, and we hope you will look us up and reach out. And I totally ditto every one of those words to everyone. My heartfelt thanks to you, Pam, and to Mrittika for this remarkable podcast-a-thon interview episode that will raise awareness about the very, very worthy, healing, and transformative organization for grieving children known as Good Grief. There is strong evidence that suggests that the children in Good Grief's grief support groups share emotional and functional support within themselves. They develop strong bonds, and they often become each other's support systems outside your centers. How very heartening and very inspiring that Good Grief is able to turn a child's profound loss to a life-changing win in transformative ways to find the good in grief. What a blessing. And thank you so much once again, heartfelt, to you, Pam and Mrittaka.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Irene. Thanks
you.
for having us.
My
Thank you.
my pleasure. And like I like to always say, to be continued. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/Grief and Rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.